The king then flew into a temper and ordered the attendant to arrest the minister, which he immediately did. The minister laughed and said that that was the explanation the king had asked for. How? The king asked. Because the order was the same, and the executive was the same, but the authority was different. When I pronounced the order there was no effect, but when you did it, the effect was immediate. It is the same with incantation. 1. Normally, however, when Bhagavan said, Guru, he meant something far greater than this, something different not in degree but in kind. He meant Satguru, or Guru Deva, and that too in its highest meaning is nothing less than one who has realized his identity with the self and abides therein constantly. D. What are the distinctive characteristics of a guru by which one can recognize him? B. The guru is one who at all times abides in the profound depths of the self. He never sees any difference between himself t. 8, I. 95 and others, and is quite free from the idea that he is the enlightened or the liberated one, while those around him are in bondage or the darkness of ignorance. His self-possession can never be shaken under any circumstances, and he is never perturbed. D. What is the essential nature of Upadesa or spiritual instruction given by the guru? B. The word Upadesa literally means restoring an object to its proper place. The mind of the disciple, having become differentiated from its true and primal state of pure being, which is the self and which is described in the scriptures as Satchitananda, being consciousness bliss, slips away therefrom and, assuming the form of thought, constantly pursues objects of sense gratification. Therefore it is assailed by the vicissitudes of life and becomes weak and dispirited. Upadesa consists in the guru restoring it to its primal state and preventing it from slipping away from the state of pure being, of absolute identity with the self, or, in other words, the being of the guru. The word can also be understood as meaning, to present an apparently distant object to close view, that is to say, it consists in the guru showing the disciple what he had considered as distant and different from himself to be immediate and identical with himself. D. If, as this implies, the real being of the guru is identical with that of the disciple, why have the scriptures categorically declared that, however great powers one may attain, he cannot attain self-realization without the grace of the guru? B. It is true that the being of the guru is identical with that of the disciple. However, it is very seldom that a person can realize his true being without the grace of the guru. 1.
SI, Chap, I, 1-4, I.
96 It is not really the bodily individual that is the guru. B. What is your idea of a guru? You think of him in human shape as a body of certain dimensions, complexion, and so on. A disciple, after realization, once said to his guru, I now realize that you dwelt in my innermost heart as the one reality in all my countless births and have now come before me as human shape and lifted this veil of ignorance. What can I do for you in return for such a great benefit? And the guru replied, you need not do anything. It is enough if you remain as you are in your true state. That is the truth about the guru. 1. Bhagavan often explained that the divine guide, the true guru, is in one's heart as well as being manifested outwardly. While the outward guru turns one's mind inwards, the inner guru pulls from within. Even one's environment does not happen by accident. The guru creates the conditions necessary for one's quest. D. What is the grace of the guru? B. The guru is the self. At some time a man grows dissatisfied with his life and, not content with what he has, seeks the satisfaction of his desires through prayer to God. His mind is gradually purified until he longs to know God, more to obtain his grace than to satisfy worldly desires. Then God's grace begins to manifest. God takes the form of a guru and appears to the devotee, teaches him the truth and, moreover, purifies his mind by association with him. The devotee's mind thus gains strength and is then able to turn inward. By meditation it is further purified until it remains calm without the least ripple. That calm expanse is the self. The guru is both outer and inner. From outside he gives a push to the mind to turn inward, while from inside he pulls dd, page 88, 1. 97 The mind towards the self and helps in quieting it. That is the grace of the guru. There is no difference between God, guru and self. D. In the Theosophical Society they meditate in order to seek masters to guide them. B. The master is within. Meditation is meant to remove the ignorant idea that he is only external. If he were some stranger whom you awaited, he would be bound to disappear also. What would be the use of a transient being like that? But as long as you think you are separate or that you are the body, so long is the outer master also necessary, and he will appear as if with a body. When the wrong identification of yourself with the body ceases, the master will be found to be none other than the self. D. Will the guru help us to know the self through initiation, and so on? B. Does the guru hold you by the hand and whisper in your ear? You may imagine him to be what you are yourself. Because you think you have a body, you think that he has also and that he will do something tangible to you. His work lies within, in the spiritual realm. D. How is the guru found? B. God, who is immanent, in his grace takes pity on the loving devotee and manifests himself according to the devotee's development. The devotee thinks that he is a man and expects a relationship as between two physical bodies. But the guru, who is God or the self-incarnate, works from within, helps the man to see his mistakes and guides him in the right path until he realizes the self within. D. What should the devotee do then? B. He has only to act according to the words of the master and work inwardly. The master is both within and without. 98 So he creates conditions to drive you inward and at the same time prepares the interior to drag you to the center. Thus he gives a push from without and exerts a pull from within so that you may be fixed at the center. You think that the world can be conquered by your own efforts. When you are frustrated externally and are driven inwards you feel, oh, there is a power higher than man. The ego is a very powerful elephant which cannot be brought under control by any creature less powerful than a lion, which, in this instance, is none other than the guru, whose very looks make the elephant-like ego tremble and die. You will know in due course that your glory lies where you cease to exist. In order to gain that state, you should surrender yourself. Then the master sees that you are in a fit state to receive guidance and he guides you. 1. What is the significance of saying that the guru is the manifestation of God or self? Bhagavan spoke always from the point of view of non-duality, and from this point of view the disciple is also guided thus. The only difference is that the guru has realized it and the disciple has not. b. So long as you seek self-realization, the guru is necessary. Guru is the self. Take guru to be the real self, and yourself to be the individual self. The disappearance of this sense of duality is the removal of ignorance. So long as duality persists in you, the guru is necessary. Because you identify yourself with the body, you think the guru too is the body. You are not the body, nor is the guru. You are the self and so is the guru. This knowledge is gained by what you call self-realization. 2. 1 mg, pp. 26-7, 2. T. 282. 99 You mistake the body for the guru. But the guru himself does not make that mistake. He is the formless self. That is within you. He appears outwardly only to guide you. 1. A curious paradox arises with the perfect guru, the self-realized man in constant, conscious identity with the self. For the very reason that he is the complete and perfect guru, he will not call himself a guru or call any his disciples, since that would be an affirmation of relationship and therefore of duality. Though he instructs his disciples, yet he does not call himself their guru, realizing as he does that guru and disciple are mere conventions born of Maya, total illusion. 2. And indeed, Bhagavan initiated his disciples through silence, or in a dream when at a distance, or by look when they were in his bodily presence. But he did not call them his disciples or give the formal initiation that postulates duality. He watched over them constantly, prescribed a discipline for them verbally or guided them to it by the power of his silent grace. But he did not call himself their guru. D. Isn't grace the gift of the guru? B. God, grace and guru are all synonymous and are both eternal and immanent. Isn't the self already within? Is it for the guru to bestow it by his look? If a guru thinks so, he does not deserve that name. The books say there are many kinds of initiation. They also say that the guru performs various rites with fire, water, incantations and so on, and calls such fantastic performances initiation, as if the disciple became ripe only after such processes were gone through by the guru. If the individual is sought, he is nowhere to be found. Such is the guru. Such is Dakshinamurti. What did he do? 1 T. 499. 2. T. 449. 100 He sat silent. The disciples appeared before him. He maintained silence and their doubts were dispelled, which means they lost their individual identities. Jnana, spiritual knowledge, is that silent understanding and not the verbal definitions that are usually given for it. Silence is the most potent form of work. However vast and emphatic the scriptures may be, they fail in their effect. The guru is quiet and peace prevails in all. His silence is vaster and more emphatic than all the scriptures put together. These questions arise because of the feeling that, in spite of having been here so long, heard so much, striven so hard, you have not gained anything. The process that goes on inside you is not apparent to you. In fact, the guru is always within you. 1. Not all felt the grace, the power of silent initiation, immediately, but Bhagavan reassured them. D. It is said that one look of a Mahatma is enough, that idols, pilgrimages, and so on, are not so effective, but I have been here for 3 months and still do not know how I have been benefited by the look of the Maharshi. B. The look has a purifying effect. Purification cannot be visualized. Just as a piece of coal takes a long time to ignite and a piece of charcoal a shorter time, while a heap of gunpowder is ignited instantaneously, so it is with different types of men coming in contact with a Mahatma. 2. Incidentally, the devotee who raised this question stayed on and became one of the staunchest and most devoted of all. Complete faith in the guru was necessary but, as explained in the previous chapter, effort was also necessary. 1 T. 398. 2. T. 155. 101 D. After leaving this ashram in October, I was aware of Bhagavan's peace enfolding me for about 10 days. All the time, while busy with work, there was an undercurrent of that peace of unity. It was almost like the dual consciousness while half asleep in a dull lecture. Then it faded out entirely and the old stupidities came instead. Work leaves no time for separate meditation. Is the constant reminder, I am, and trying to feel this while actually at work enough? B. It will become constant when the mind is strengthened. Repeated practice strengthens the mind, and such a mind is capable of holding on to the current. Then, whether you are engaged in work or not, the current remains unaffected and uninterrupted. Point 1. It often happened that the disciple saw no improvement in himself despite the effort, but he was told to have faith in the guru. The process might not be visible to himself and improvement might be the greatest when least apparent. He evoked no spectacular changes in the devotees, for such changes may be a superstructure without foundation and collapse later. Indeed, it sometimes happened that a devotee would grow despondent, seeing no improvement at all in himself and would complain that he was not progressing at all. In such cases Bhagavan might offer consolation or might retort, "How do you know there is no progress?" And he would explain that it is the guru, not the disciple, who sees the progress made. It is for the disciple to carry on perseveringly with his work even though the structure being raised may be out of sight of the mind. Point 2. 1t, 310, 2. Rm, page 198. 102 There were some who desired a definite statement that Bhagavan was a guru, but this he would not make. Mr. Evans Wentz, the well-known writer on Tibetan yoga, asked whether Bhagavan initiated disciples, but Bhagavan sat silent, giving no reply. Then one of the devotees took it on himself to answer that the Maharshi does not regard any as being outside himself and therefore none can be disciples to him. His grace is all-pervading and is bestowed in silence on any deserving individual. Point 1. Bhagavan heard the explanation and did not reject it. Sometimes he would explain that the guru-disciple relationship was necessary from the point of view of the disciple, since the latter viewed things from the standpoint of duality. And therefore the disciple could affirm that so-and-so was his guru, although the guru would not affirm that the other was his disciple. D. Bhagavan says he has no disciples. B. Yes. D. He also says that a guru is necessary if one wishes to attain liberation. B. Yes. D. What then must I do? Has my sitting here all these years been just a waste of time? Must I go and look for some guru in order to receive initiation, seeing that Bhagavan says he is not a guru? B. What do you think brought you here such a long distance and made you remain here so long? Why do you doubt? If there had been any need to seek a guru elsewhere, you would have gone away long ago. The guru or Janani, enlightened T. 23, I. 103:1, sees no difference between himself and others. For him all are Jananas, all are one with himself, so how can a Janani say that such and such is his disciple? But the unliberated one sees all as multiple, he sees all as different from himself, so to him the guru-disciple relationship is a reality. For him there are three ways of initiation, by touch, look and silence. Sri B. Bhagavan here gave the disciple to understand that this way was by silence, as B has to many on other occasions. D. Then Bhagavan does have disciples? B. As I said, from Bhagavan's point of view there are no disciples, but from that of the disciple, the grace of the guru is like an ocean. If he comes with a cup he will get only a cupful. It is no use complaining of the niggardliness of the ocean. The bigger the vessel the more he will be able to carry. It is entirely up to him. Point 1. When the devotee pressed him once more for confirmation, he turned to the attendant and said humorously, "Let him get a document from the sub-registrar and take it to the office and get the office stamp on it." In the following conversation, he implied clearly enough that he was to be regarded as the visible guru. D. Can Sri Bhagavan help us to realize the truth? B. Help is always there. D. Then, there is no need to ask questions. I do not feel the ever-present help. B. Surrender and you will find it. D. I am always at your feet. Will Bhagavan give me some upadesa to follow? Otherwise how can I get the help, living 600 miles away? B. The sad guru is within. Rm, pp. 167-8, 1. 104d. The sad guru is necessary to guide me to understand that fact. B. The sad guru is within you. D. I want a visible guru. B. That visible guru says that he is within. It was in keeping with the purely spiritual nature of Bhagavan's initiation and guidance that he was averse to touching his disciples or being touched by them. In the further part of the talk just quoted the devotee requests. D. Will the sad guru place his hand on my head to assure me of his help? Then I shall have the consolation of knowing that his promise will be fulfilled. In such cases Bhagavan was apt either to remain silent or to turn it into a joke. On this occasion he took the latter course. B. Next you will be asking me for a bond and filing a suit if you imagine that the help is not forthcoming. Point 1. It may be said by some readers of this book that this doctrine of God manifested as guru was all right for those who had the good fortune to meet Bhagavan in his lifetime, but what of those who seek a guru now? There are gurus to be found, although the appearance on earth of a perfect sad guru such as Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, a Jivanmukta living in constant conscious identity with the self, is a very rare thing. D. How can one know whether a particular person is competent to be a guru? B. By the peace of mind you feel in his presence and by the respect you feel for him. D. And if it turns out that he is not competent, what will be the fate of the disciple who has implicit faith in him? T. 434, I. 105b. The fate of each one will be according to his merit. Point 1. But if the guru has not attained the supreme state, can he be regarded as a manifestation of God or the self? In a way, he can. The disciple himself is the self, although ignorant of his true identity. The entire outer world manifests tendencies and possibilities in himself, and among these the person who functions as guru for him manifests the possibility of divine guidance, even without full awareness. There is, however, another possibility also, and that is continued guidance by Bhagavan. It will be recalled that Bhagavan confirmed that the guru need not necessarily take human form. He sometimes added that this happened only in rare cases. He himself had no human guru. Just as, with self-inquiry, he created a new path suitable to the conditions of the modern world. A path that can be followed without any outward forms, invisibly, while conforming to the outer conditions of modern life, so also he brought to men the possibility of silent, formless initiation, requiring no physical guru. In his lifetime initiation was by look or silence. He often confirmed that the truest upadesa or spiritual instruction was by silence. The highest form of grace is silence. It is also the highest spiritual instruction. All other modes of instruction are derived from silence and are therefore secondary. Silence is the primary form. If the guru is silent, the seeker's mind gets purified by itself. Point 2. The disciples of Bhagavan have found that the silent instruction continues as before. Others who have never met him in his lifetime have been drawn to him and begun to follow the guidance. If this seems strange to anyone, it means that he has not understood what Bhagavan was in his lifetime, that he identifies the guru with the body. It is sometimes asked how Jivanmukta continues to guide disciples after death, when 1t. 282, 2t. 518, 106 he has merged in the Absolute, the Self of all. But the Jivanmukta is already consciously one with the Absolute, the Self of all, while still embodied. If this is not incompatible with initiation and guidance while he wears a body, it is not afterwards. Death makes no difference to him, no change in his state. There is nothing more to be acquired, because he is that now. There is nothing to be lost, because he has already completely surrendered the ego. P. Banerjee asked Bhagavan what is the difference between Jivanmukti, realization while in the body, and Vidabhamukti, realization after death. B. There is no difference. For those who ask, it is said, a Janani with a body is a Jivanmukta and he attains Vidabhamukti when he sheds the body. But this difference exists only for the onlooker, not for the Janani. His state is the same before and after the body is dropped. We think of the Janani as a human form or as being in that form. But he knows that he is the self, the one reality which is both inside and out, and which is not bounded by any form or shape. There is a verse in the Bhagavata, here Bhagavan quoted the verse in Tamil, which says, just as a man who is drunk is not conscious whether his upper cloth is on his body or has slipped away from it, the Janani is hardly conscious of his body, and it makes no difference to him whether the body remains or has dropped off. Point 1. He did not encourage curiosity and seldom answered questions about the state of the Janani or the realized man, but when asked whether the Janani continues to perform a function after the death of the body, I have heard him reply briefly that in some cases he may. Also he himself confirmed what his disciples know now from experience, that the Guru may continue to give guidance after the death of Rhe body, when no longer in human form. DD, page 101, 1. 107 Dr. Masalawala, retired Chief Medical Officer of Bhopal, who has been here for over a month and is in temporary charge of the Azramam Hospital in the absence of Dr. K. Shiva Rao, put the following questions to Bhagavan and received the following answers. D. Bhagavan says, the influence of the Janani steals into the devotee in silence. Bhagavan also says, contact with great men, exalted souls, is one efficacious means of realizing one's true being. B. Yes. What is the contradiction? Janani, great men, exalted souls. Does he differentiate between them? Thereupon I said, no. B. Contact with them is good. They will work through silence. By speaking, their power is reduced. Speech is always less powerful than silence. So silent contact is the best. D. Does the contact continue even after the dissolution of the physical body of the Janani or only so long as he is in flesh and blood? B. The Guru is not in the physical form. So contact will remain even after his physical form vanishes. Point 1. He declared that one who has obtained the grace of the Guru would never be abandoned. He who has earned the grace of the Guru will undoubtedly be saved and never forsaken, just as the prey that has fallen into the tiger's jaw will never be allowed to escape. Point 2. Remembering this, perhaps, some devotees complained, when the death of his body was imminent, that he was abandoning them and asked what they could do without his continued guidance. He answered briefly, 1 DD, pp. 168-9, 2. W, section 20, 108 You attach too much importance to the body. 1. The implication was clear. The Guru is the same whether he wears a body or not. And his devotees have since found it to be so. Having dealt with the need to pass from theory to practice, the possibility of practicing in the conditions of the modern world without any outward observances, and the necessity for a Guru, the next 2 chapters will deal with the forms of practice that Bhagavan prescribed. His prescribing them openly is in itself remarkable. In their public writings and utterances, the spiritual masters of all religions have dealt mainly with theory and said little or nothing about the practical discipline they enjoined. The reason for this is obvious. It is that, as Bhagavan explains in the story of the king and his minister quoted earlier in this chapter, A technique of spiritual training can be legitimately used and be effective for good only when the use of it has been authorized by one duly qualified. And yet Bhagavan himself openly expounded the methods he enjoined, both in speech and writing. Most of the books on which the present exposition is based were written and published during his lifetime, and he always showed interest in them and often recommended a questioner to turn to one of them for his answer. Even when it became clear that the life of his body was approaching its end, he continued to show interest in their editing and publication. Why did he permit this, when he was insistent that no technique is valid without the authorization of the guru? The only answer is the one given above. Physical death made no difference. If the mukta can be a guru before death, so can he also after death. He becomes no more a mukta by dying. The path that had been made open by his grace to those who turned to him was not for his lifetime only or for those few only who could approach him physically. He said, "They say that I am dying, but I am not going away. Where could I go? I am here. 2. 18C2RM, page 222. 109 Chapter 5 Self-Enquiry. Although refraining, for the reason given in the previous chapter, from describing himself as a guru, Sri Bhagavan did in fact constantly act as such. When any visitor came with questions, he would turn the trend of them from theory to practice, and in explaining and enjoining methods of spiritual training he was as forthcoming as he was reluctant to expound mere theory. He often said that the true teaching was in silence, but this did not mean that verbal expositions also were not given. They indicated to the seeker in what way he should make an effort, while the silent influence on his heart helped him to do so. As will be shown in the next chapter, Sri Bhagavan authorized many different methods. However, he laid the greatest emphasis on self-enquiry and constantly recommended it, and therefore his method will be dealt with first. It is not a new method. Indeed, being the most direct method of all, it must be the most ancient. However, in ancient rhymes it had been a path reserved for the heroic few who could strive in solitude, withdrawn from the world in constant meditation. In recent times, as might be expected, it had become increasingly rare. What Bhagavan did was to restore it in a new form combined with karma marga, the path of action, in such a way that it could be used in the conditions of the modern world. Since it requires no ritual or outer form, it is in fact the ideal method for the needs of our times. And yet it is not weakened or diluted by being adapted to the modern conditions of life, but remains central and direct. For the subsidence of the mind there is no other means more effective than self-enquiry. Even though the mind subsides by other means, that is only apparently so, it will rise again. 1. W. Section 12. 1. 110 This is the direct method. All other methods are practiced while retaining the ego and therefore many doubts arise and the ultimate question still remains to be tackled in the end. But in this method the final question is the only one and is raised from the very beginning. 1. Self-enquiry leads directly to self-realization by removing the obstacles which make you think that the self is not already realized. 2. Meditation requires an object to meditate on, whereas in self-enquiry there is only the subject and no object. That is the difference between them. 3. D. Why should self-enquiry alone be considered the direct path to realization? B. Because every kind of path except self-enquiry presupposes the retention of the mind as the instrument for following it, and cannot be followed without the mind. The ego may take different and more subtle forms at different stages of one's practice, but it is never destroyed. The attempt to destroy the ego or the mind by methods other than self-enquiry is like a thief turning policeman to catch the thief that is himself. Self-enquiry alone can reveal the truth that neither the ego nor the mind really exists and enable one to realize the pure and differentiated being of the self or the absolute. 4. This statement that the mind is not used by the method of self-enquiry was not always understood, and therefore Bhagavan, when asked, explained that it means that the mind is not taken for granted as a real entity but its very existence is questioned, and that this is the easiest way to dispel the illusion of its existence. 1. T. 146. 2. T. 298. 3. T. 390. 4. Mg, page 38. Ill be, to ask the mind to kill the mind is like making the thief the policeman. He will go with you and pretend to catch the thief, but nothing will be gained. So, you must turn inward and see where the mind rises from and then it will cease to exist. In reference to this answer, Sri Thambi Thorai of Jaffna, who has been living as a sadhu in Palakodu for over a year, asked me whether asking the mind to turn inward and seek its source is not also employing the mind. I put this doubt before Bhagavan. B. Of course, we are employing the mind. It is well known and admitted that only with the help of the mind can the mind be killed. But instead of setting about saying there is a mind and I want to kill it, you begin to seek its source, and then you find it does not exist at all. The mind turned outwards results in thoughts and objects. Turned inwards it becomes itself the self. 1. It can be said that the mind ceases to exist or that it becomes transformed into the self. The meaning is really the same. It does not mean that a person becomes mindless, like a stone, but that the pure consciousness of the self is no longer confined within the narrow limits of an individualized mind and that he no longer sees through a glass darkly, but with clarity and radiant vision. By steady and continuous investigation into the nature of the mind is transformed into that to which I refers, and that is in fact the self. The mind has necessarily to depend for its existence on something gross, it never subsists by itself. It is the mind that is otherwise called the subtle body, ego, jiva or soul. That which arises in the physical body as I is the mind. If one inquires whence the T thought arises in the body in the first instance, it will be found that it is from the hridayam or the heart. That is the source and stay of the mind. Or again, even dd, page 37, 1. 112. If one merely continuously repeats to oneself inwardly, I, with the entire mind fixed thereon, that also leads to the same source. The first and foremost of all thoughts that arise in the mind is the primal T thought. It is only after the rise or origin of the T thought that innumerable other thoughts arise. In other words, only after the first personal pronoun, I, has arisen, do the second and third personal pronouns, you, he, etc., occur to the mind, and they cannot subsist without it. Since every other thought can occur only after the rise of the T thought, and since the mind is nothing but a bundle of thoughts, it is only through the enquiry, who am I, that the mind subsides. Moreover, the integral T thought implicit in such enquiry, having destroyed all other thoughts, itself finally gets destroyed or consumed, just as a stick used for stirring the burning funeral pyre gets consumed. 1. It must already be apparent from these indications that self-inquiry as taught by Bhagavan is something very different from the introversion of psychologists. In fact, it is not really a mental process at all. Introversion means studying the composition and contents of the mind, whereas this is an attempt to probe behind the mind to the self from which it arises. When the mind or ego has to be discarded in any case, why waste time analyzing it? To inquire, who am I that am in bondage, and thus know one's real nature is the only liberation. To keep the mind constantly turned inwards and to abide thus in the self is the only self-enquiry. Just as it is futile to examine the rubbish that has to be swept up only to be thrown away, so it is futile for him who seeks to know the self to set to work enumerating the tattvas that envelop the self and examining them instead of Section 10, I. 113 casting them away. He should consider the phenomenal world, with reference to himself, as merely a dream. 1. Similarly, self-enquiry differs fundamentally from psychoanalysis or any other kind of psychiatric treatment. Such treatment can only aim at producing a normal, healthy, integrated human being but not at transcending the bounds of the individual human state, since those who conduct it have themselves not done this and cannot open a road they have not trod. One thing, however, that self-enquiry in its initial stages has in common with psychiatric treatment is that it serves to bring up hidden thoughts and impurities from the depths of the mind. D. Other thoughts arise more forcibly when one attempts meditation. B. Yes, all kinds of thoughts arise in meditation. That is only right, for what lies hidden in you is brought out. Unless it rises up, how can it be destroyed? Thoughts rise up spontaneously but only to be extinguished in due course, thus strengthening the mind. 2. D. When I concentrate, all sorts of thoughts arise and disturb me. The more I try, the more thoughts rise up. What should I do? B. Yes, that will happen. All that is inside will try to come out. There is no other way except to pull the mind up each time it wants to go astray and fix it in the self. 3. D. Bhagavan has often said that one must reject other thoughts when one begins the quest, but thoughts are endless. If one thought is rejected another comes up and there seems to be no end at all. 1. W. Section 21, 2. Mg, page 14, 3. DD, page 41. 114b. I do not say that you must keep on rejecting thoughts. If you cling to yourself, to the T thought, and your interest keeps you to that single thought, other thoughts will get rejected and will automatically vanish. 1. Just as self-enquiry is not introspection as understood by the psychologists, so also it is not argument or speculation as understood by the philosophers. D. When I think, who am I? The answer comes. I am not this mortal body but am consciousness or the self. And then another thought suddenly arises. Why has the self become manifest? In other words, why has God created the world? B. The enquiry, who am I, really means trying to find the source of the ego or of the T thought. You are not to occupy the mind with other thoughts, such as, I am not the body. Seeking the source of the I serves as a means of getting rid of all other thoughts. You should not allow any scope for other thoughts such as you mention, but should keep the attention fixed on finding the source of the I thought by asking, when any other thought arises, to whom it occurs, and if the answer is, to me, you then resume the thought. What is this I, and what is its source? 2. Bhagavan did sometimes allow or even use mental argument, but that was to convince the beginner of the unreality of the individual self or ego and thus induce him to take up self-inquiry. The argument itself was not self-enquiry. D. Who am I? How is the answer to be found? B. Ask yourself the question. The body, anamaya, and its functions are not I. Going deeper, the mind. 1 SDB, IV, 2. DD, page 80, 115, manamaya, and its functions are not I. The next step takes one to the question. Wherefrom do these thoughts arise? The thoughts may be spontaneous, superficial, or analytical. They operate in the mind. Then who is aware of them? The existence of thoughts, their clear conception and operation, become evident to the individual. This analysis leads to the conclusion that the individuality is operative as the cognizer of the existence of thoughts and their sequence. This individuality is the ego, or, as people say, T Vijnanamaya, intellect, as only the sheath of the I and not the I itself. Inquiring further, the questions arise. What is this I? Where from does it come? I was not aware in sleep. Simultaneously with its rise, sleep changes to dream and wakefulness. But I am not concerned with the dream state just now. Who am I now, in the wakeful state? If I originated on waking from sleep, then the I was covered up with ignorance. Such an ignorant I cannot be what the scriptures refer to or the wise affirm. I am beyond even sleep. I must be here and now, and must be what I was all along in sleep and dream also, unaffected by the qualities of these states. I must therefore be the unqualified substratum underlying these three states, after Anandamayakosa is transcended. Point 1. Two Parsi ladies arrived from Ahmedabad and spoke with Bhagavan. Bhagavan, we have been spiritually inclined from childhood. We have read several books on philosophy and are attracted by Vedanta. So we read the Upanishads, Yoga Vasishta, Bhagavad Gita, etc. We try to meditate, but there is no progress in our meditation. We do not understand how to realize. Can you kindly help us towards realization? T. 25. I. 116b. How do you meditate? I begin by asking myself, who am I? And eliminate the body is not I, the breath is not I, the mind is not I, but then I am unable to proceed further. B. Well, that is all right so far as the mind goes. Your process is only mental. Actually, all the scriptures mention this process only in order to guide the seeker to the truth. The truth cannot be directly indicated, that is why this mental process is used. You see, he who eliminates all the not I cannot eliminate the I in order to be able to say, I am not this or I am that, there must be the I to say it. This I is only the ego or the T-thought. After the rising up of this I thought, all other thoughts arise. The T-thought is therefore the root thought. If the root is pulled out, all the rest is uprooted at the same time. Therefore seek the root I, question yourself. Who am I? Find out the source of the I. Then all these problems will vanish and the pure self alone will remain. L. But how am I to do it? B. The I is always there, whether in deep sleep, in dream or in the waking state. The one who sleeps is the same as the one who is now speaking. There is always the feeling of I, if it were not so you would have to deny your existence. But you do not. You say, I am. Find out who is. L. I still do not understand. You say the I is now the false I, how am I to eliminate this wrong I? B. You need not eliminate any false I, how can I eliminate itself? All that you need do is to find out its origin and stay there. Your effort can extend only so far. Then the beyond will take care of itself. You are helpless there, no effort can reach it. L. If I am always here and now, why do I not feel so? 117b. Who says that you do not? Does the real I, or the false T? Ask yourself and you will find that it is the false I. The false I is the obstruction which has to be removed in order that the true I may cease to be hidden. The feeling, I have nor realized, is the obstruction to realization. In fact, it is already realized. There is nothing more to be realized. If there were, realization would be something new which did not yet exist, but was to come about in the future, but whatever is born will also die. If realization is not eternal, it is not worth having. Therefore, what we seek is not something that must begin to exist but only that which is eternal but is veiled from us by obstructions. All that we need do is to remove the obstruction. What is eternal is not recognized as such, owing to ignorance. Ignorance is the obstruction. Get rid of it and all will be well. This ignorance is identical with the T-thought. Find its source and it will vanish. The T-thought is like a spirit which, although not palpable, rises up simultaneously with the body, flourishes with it and disappears with it. The body consciousness is the wrong I, give it up. You can do so by seeking the source of I. The body does not say, I am. It is you who say, I am the body. Find out who this I is. Seek its source and it will vanish. L. Then, will there be bliss? B. Bliss is co-eval with being consciousness. All the arguments relating to the eternal being apply to eternal bliss also. Your nature is bliss. Ignorance is now hiding the bliss, but you have only to remove the ignorance for the bliss to be freed. L. Should we not find out the ultimate reality of the world as individual and God? B. These are conceptions of the I, they arise only after the advent of the T-thought. Did you think of them in deep sleep? Yet you existed in sleep, and the same you is speaking. 118 Now, if they were real, would they not exist in your sleep also? They are dependent on the T-thought. Again, does the world tell you, I am the world? Does the body say, I am the body? You say, this is the world, this is the body, and so on. So these are only your conceptions. Find out who you are, and that will be the end of all doubts. L. What becomes of the body after realization? Does it continue to exist or not? We see realized people performing actions like other people. B. This question need not worry you now. You can ask it after realization if you feel like it. As for realized beings, let them take care of themselves. Why do you worry about them? In fact, after realization, neither the body nor anything else will appear different from the self. L. If we are always being consciousness bliss, why does God place us in difficulties? Why did he create us? B. Does God come and tell you that he placed you in difficulties? It is you who say so. It is the false I again. If that disappears, there will be no one to say that God created this or that. That which is does not even say, I am. For does any doubt arise that, I am not? Only if a doubt arose whether one was a cow or a buffalo would one have to remind oneself that one is not an animal but a man. But this never happens. It is the same with one's own existence and realization. Point 1. This last quotation brings us back from what self-enquiry is not, to what it is. When the mind unceasingly investigates its own nature, it transpires that there is no such thing as the mind. This is the direct path for all. T. 197. 1. 119. The mind is merely thoughts. Of all thoughts the thought, I, is the root. Therefore, the mind is only the thought, I. Whence does this thought, I, arise? Seek for it within, it then vanishes. This is the pursuit of wisdom. Where the I vanishes, there appears an I by itself. This is the infinite, purnam. D. If the ego is, everything else is also. If the ego is not, nothing else is. Indeed, the ego is all. Therefore, the enquiry as to what this ego is the only way of giving up everything. The state of non-emergence of I is the state of being that. Without questing for that state of non-emergence of I, and attaining it, how can one accomplish one's own extinction, from which the I does not revive? Without that attainment, how is it possible to abide in one's true state, where one is that? Just as a man would dive in order to get something that had fallen into the water, so one should dive into oneself with a keen, one-pointed mind, controlling speech and breath, and find the place whence the I originates. The only enquiry leading to self-realization is seeking the source of the word, I. Meditation on, I am not this, I am that, may be an aid to enquiry, but it cannot be the enquiry. If one inquires who am I? Within the mind, the individual I falls down abashed as soon as one reaches the heart, and immediately reality manifests itself spontaneously as I. Although it reveals itself as I, it is not the ego but the perfect being, the absolute self. Point 1. 2b. The notions of bondage and liberation are merely modifications of the mind. They have no reality of their own, and therefore cannot function of their own accord. Since they are modifications of something else, there must be an entity, independent of them, as their common source and support. If 1 EI, W, 17-20, 2. FV, 26-30, 120. Therefore, one investigates into that source in order to know of whom the bondage or liberation is predicated. One will find that they are predicated of me, that is, oneself. If one then earnestly inquires, who am I? One will see that there is no such thing as I or me. That which remains on seeing that the I does not exist is realized vividly and unmistakably as self-luminous and subsisting merely as itself. This vivid realization, as a direct and immediate experience of the supreme truth, comes quite naturally, with nothing uncommon about it, to everyone who, remaining just as he is, inquires introspectively without allowing the mind to become externalized even for a moment or wasting time in mere talk. There is, therefore, not the least doubt regarding the well-established conclusion that to those who have attained this realization and thus abide absolutely identical with the self, there is neither bondage nor liberation. Point 1. B. The self is pure consciousnness. Yet a man identifies himself with the body which is insentient and does not itself say, I am the body. Someone else says so. The unlimited self does not. Who does? A spurious I arises between pure consciousness and the insentient body and imagines itself to be limited to the body. Seek this and it will vanish like a phantom. The phantom is the ego or mind or individuality. All the scriptures are based on the rise of this phantom, whose elimination is their purpose. The present state is mere illusion. Its dissolution is the goal and nothing else. Point 2. Bhagavan here refers to the ego as the phantom, or a spurious I. In the explanation to the two Parsi ladies quoted earlier, he spoke of a false I and a true I. For practical purposes, he did sometimes speak of giving up the false I in quest of the true 1 SI. Chap. IV. Section 15. 2. T. 427. 121. But that should not be taken as implying that there are two selves in a man. What he really meant was simply giving up the false identification of the I as an individual being in order to realize one's true identity as the universal self. He frequently insisted that there are not two, is of which one can seek and know the other. According to the truth of non-duality, to see the self is to be the self, otherwise, there would be the duality of a subject and object and the trinity of seer, sight and seen. D. How is one to realize the self? B. Whose self? Find out. D. Mine. But, who am I? B. It is you who must find out. D. I don't know. B. Just think over the question. Who is it that says, I don't know? Who is the I in your statement? What is not known? D. Somebody or something in me. B. Who is that somebody? In whom? D. Perhaps some power. B. Find out. D. Why was I born? B. Who has born? The answer is the same to all your questions. D. Who am I, then? B. Smiling. Have you come to examine me? You must say who you are. D. However much I may try, I do not seem to catch the T. It is not even clearly discernible. B. Who is it that says that the I is not discernible? Are there two I's in you, that one is not discernible to the other? D. Instead of inquiring, who am I, can I put the question to myself, who are you, so that my mind may be fixed on you whom I consider to be God in the form of the 122 Guru? Perhaps I would come nearer to the goal of my quest by that enquiry than by asking myself, who am I? B. Whatever form your enquiry may take, you must finally come to the one, I, the self. All these distinctions made between I and you, master and disciple, are merely a sign of ignorance. The supreme I alone is. To think otherwise is to delude oneself. Therefore, since your aim is to transcend here and now these superficialities of physical existence through self-enquiry, where is the scope for making the distinctions of you and I, which pertain only to the body? When you turn the mind inwards, seeking the source of thought, where is the you and where the I? You should seek and be the self that includes all. D. But isn't it funny that the I should be searching for the I? Doesn't the enquiry, who am I, turn out in the end to be an empty formula? Or am I to put the question to myself endlessly, repeating it like some mantra? B. Self-enquiry is certainly not an empty formula. It is more than the repetition of any mantra. If the enquiry, who am I, were mere mental questioning, it would not be of much value. The very purpose of self-enquiry is to focus the entire mind at its source. It is not, therefore, a case of one I searching for another I, much less is self-enquiry an empty formula, for it involves an intense activity of the entire mind to keep it steadily poised in pure self-awareness. Self-enquiry is the one infallible means, the only direct one, to realize the unconditioned, absolute being that you really are. Point 1. The following passages show still more clearly that it is a question of tracing the I thought back to its source, not of one I discovering another. MG, pp. 35-8, 1. 123v. I am told that according to your school I must find out the source of my thought. How am I to do it? B. I have no school, however, it is true that one should trace the source of all thoughts. V. Suppose I have the thought, horse, and try to trace its source. I find that it is due to memory and the memory in its turn is due to prior perception of the object, horse, but that is all. B. Who asked you to think about all that? All those are also thoughts. What good will it do you to go on thinking about memory and perception? It will be endless, like the old dispute, which came first, the tree or the seed? Ask who has this perception and memory. That has the perception and memory, whence does it arise? Find this out, because perception or memory or any other experience only comes to that you do not have such experiences during sleep and yet you say that you existed during sleep. And you exist now too. That shows that the I continues while other things come and go. V. I am asked to find out the source of I, and in fact that is what I want to find out, but how can I? What is the source from which I came? B. You came from the same source in which you were during sleep. Only during sleep you could not know where you entered. That is why you must make the enquiry while awake. Some of us advised the visitor to read Huampi and Ramana Gita, and Bhagavan also told him he might do so. He did so during the day, and in the evening he said to Bhagavan, those books prescribe self-enquiry, but how is one to do it? B. That must also be prescribed in the books. V. Am I to concentrate on the thought, who am I? 124b. It means that you must concentrate to see where the T-thought arises. Instead of looking outwards, look inwards and see where the T-thought arises. V. And Bhagavan says that if I see that, I shall realize the self. B. There is no such thing as realizing the self. How is one to realize or make real what is real? People all realize or regard as real what is unreal, and all they have to do is to give up doing so. When you do that, you will remain as you always are and the real will be real. It is only to help people give up regarding the unreal as real that all the religions and practices taught by them have come into being. V. Whence comes birth? B. Whose birth? V. The Upanishads say, he who knows Brahman becomes Brahman. B. It is not a matter of becoming but of being. Point 1. There is no such thing as realizing the self. Bhagavan has often said this in order to remind those who ask that the self alone is, now and eternally, and is not something new to be discovered. This paradox is of the essence of non-dualism. In answer to a question as to what is the best way to the goal, Bhagavan said, there is no goal to be reached. There is nothing to be attained. You are the self. You exist always. Nothing more can be predicated of the self than that it exists. Seeing God or the self is only being the self, that is yourself. Seeing is being. You, being the self, want to know how to attain the self. It is like a man being at Ramanasramam and asking how many ways there are of going to Ramanasramam and which is the best way for him. All that is dd, pp. 268-9, 1. 125 required of you is to give up the thought that you are this body and give up all thoughts of external things or the non-self. As often as the mind goes out towards objects, stop it and fix it in the self or T. That is all the effort required on your part. 1. Despite this paradox, however, Bhagavan also stressed the necessity of effort, as explained in chapter 2 of this book. Ceaseless practice is essential until one attains without the least effort that natural and primal state of mind which is free from thought, in other words, until the t, my, and mine are completely eradicated and destroyed. Point 2. It is in order to safeguard the viewpoint that there is nothing new to be discovered that Advaita explains that it is only a question of removing the screen of ignorance, just as by removing water plants one reveals beneath them the water that was already there, or as the removal of clouds reveals the blue sky that is there already but was hidden by them. D. How can one know the self? B. The self always is. There is no knowing it. It is not some new knowledge to be acquired. What is new and not here and now cannot be permanent. The self always is, but knowledge of it is obstructed and the obstruction is called ignorance. Remove the ignorance and knowledge shines forth. In fact, it is not the self that has this ignorance or even knowledge. These are only accretions to be cleared away. That is why the self is said to be beyond knowledge and ignorance. It remains as it naturally is. That is all. Point 3. 1 dd, page 332, 2. Si, chap. 2, section 18, 3. T, 49. 126. This concentration on the self, of course, requires intense control of the mind, and many complained that it was not easy. In the evening a visitor asked Bhagavan how to control the wandering mind. He began by saying that it was a question which particularly troubled him. Bhagavan replied laughing, "That is nothing particular to you. That is what everybody asks and what is dealt with by all the scriptures, such as the Gita. What other way is there except to draw the mind back every time it strays or turns outwards, as advised in the Gita? Of course it is not an easy thing to do. It will come only with practice." The visitor said that the mind strays after what it desires and won't stay fixed on the object we set before it. When there was this sort of complaint, Bhagavan sometimes answered that self-enquiry does not set any object before the mind but simply turns it in on itself, seeking its source. On this occasion, however, he answered from the point of view of desire or happiness. Everybody seeks only what brings him happiness. Your mind wanders out after some object or other because you think that happiness comes from it, but find out where all happiness comes from, including that which you regard as coming from sense objects. You will find that it all comes from the self alone, and then you will be able to abide in the self. Point 1. Sometimes people complained of the difficulty of quelling thoughts. Bhagavan brought them round again to self-enquiry by reminding them that it is the thinker or, in case of doubt, the doubter whom one must examine. There may be 1,000 doubts, but one does not doubt the existence of the doubter. Who is he? dd, page 298, 1. 127. All doubts will cease only when the doubter and his source have been found. It is no use endlessly removing doubts. If we clear up, one another will arise and there will be no end to them. But if the doubter himself is found to be really non-existent by seeking his source, then all doubts will cease. Point 1. Mind control, of course, means concentration. But by concentration, Bhagavan did not mean concentrating on one thought. Although he did not always discourage this, but concentrating on the sense of being, the feeling of I am, and excluding all thoughts. B. Concentration is not thinking of one thing. On the contrary, it is excluding all thoughts, since all thoughts obstruct the sense of one's true being. All efforts are to be directed simply to removing the veil of ignorance. Point 2. In a number of passages already quoted, Bhagavan does not only tell the questioner to investigate the thought but to find out where it arises. This connects self-enquiry with concentration on the heart at the right side, referred to in chapter 1, and shows still more clearly that it is not a mental process. Indeed, an actual liberation that can be felt physically arises in this center during self-enquiry. Concentrating the mind solely on the self will lead to happiness or bliss. Drawing in the thoughts, restraining them and preventing them from straying outwards is called detachment, vairagya. Fixing them in the self is spiritual practice, sadhana. Concentrating on the heart is the same as concentrating on the self. Heart is another name for self. Point 3. 1 dd, page 26, 2. T, 398, 3. dd, page 294. 128. G.V. Subaramayab. Is it stated in any book that for ultimate and final realization one must ultimately come to the heart, even after reaching the Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus, the center in the crown of the head, and that the heart is at the right side? B. No, I have not come across this in any book, although in a Malayalam book on medicine I came across a stanza locating the heart on the right side, and I have translated it into Tamil in the supplement to the 40 verses. We know nothing about the other centers. We cannot be sure what we arrive at by concentrating on them and realizing them. But as the T arises from the heart, it must sink back and merge there for self-realization. Anyway, that has been my experience. Point 1. Know that the pure and changeless self-awareness in the heart is the knowledge which, through destruction of the ego, bestows liberation. The body is inert like an earthen pot. Since it has no eye-consciousness and since in deep sleep, when bodiless, we experience our natural being, the body cannot be the T. Who then is it that causes I-ness? Where is he? In the heart cave of those who thus inquire and who know and abide as the self, Lord Arunachala Shiva shines forth as himself as, that am I, consciousness. Point 2. D. Bhagavan was saying that the heart is the center of the self. B. Yes, it is the one supreme center of the self. You need have no doubts about that. The real self is there in the heart behind the ego self. D. Will Bhagavan please tell me where in the body it is? B. You cannot know it with your mind or picture it with your imagination, although I tell you that it is here, pointing to 1dd, page 253.
2 ФВС 9-10.
129 The right side of the chest. The only direct way to realize it is to stop imagining and try to be yourself. Then you automatically feel that the center is there. It is the center spoken of in the scriptures as the heart cavity. D. Can I be sure that the ancients meant this center by the term heart? B. Yes, you can, but you should try to have the experience rather than locate it. A man does not have to go and find where his eyes are in order to see. The heart is there, always open to you, if you care to enter it, always supporting your movements, although you may be unaware of it. It is perhaps more correct to say that the self is the heart. Really, the self is the center and is everywhere aware of itself as the heart or self-awareness. D. When Bhagavan says that the heart is the supreme center of the spirit or the self, does that imply that it is not one of the 6 yogic centers, chakras? B. The yogic centers, counting from the bottom upwards, are a series of centers in the nervous system. They represent various stages, each having its own kind of power or knowledge, leading to the Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus in the brain, where is seated the supreme Shakti, power. But the self that supports the whole movement of the Shakti is not located there but supports it from the heart center. D. Then it is different from the manifestation of Shakti. B. Really, there is no manifestation of Shakti apart from the self. The self became all these Shaktis. When the yogi attains the highest state of spiritual awareness, samadhi, it is the self in the heart that supports him in that state whether he is aware of it or not. But if his awareness is centered in the heart, he realizes that, whatever centers or states he may be in, he is always the same truth, the same heart, the one self, the spirit that is present. 130 Throughout, eternal and immutable. The Tantra Sastra calls the heart Surya Mandala or the solar orb, and the Sabasrara as Chandra Mandala or lunar orb. This shows the relative importance of the 2.1. Just as this concentration on the heart establishes a point of contact with yoga, so also Bhagavan sometimes pointed out the affinity with bhakti, the path of devotion, and said that the two paths lead to the same end. Perfect devotion means complete surrender of the ego to God or Guru conceived of as other than oneself, while self-enquiry leads to dissolution of the ego. More will be said about Bhakti Marga in the next chapter, but the following explanation shows how the two paths converge. D. If the I is an illusion, who is it that casts off the illusion? B. The T casts off the illusion of the I, and yet remains I, such is the paradox of self-realization. The realized do not see any paradox in it. Consider the case of the worshipper. He approaches God and prays to be absorbed in him. He then surrenders himself in faith and by concentration. And what remains afterwards? In the place of the original I, self-surrender leaves a residuum of God in which the I is lost. That is the highest form of devotion or surrender and the peak of detachment. You may give up this and that of my possessions, but if, instead, you give up I and mine, all is given up at a stroke and the very seed of possession is destroyed. Thus the evil is nipped in the bud or crushed in the germ. But detachment must be very strong to do this. The craving to do it must equal the craving of a man who is held underwater to rise to the surface and breathe. Point 2. If distracting thoughts are a danger on one hand, so also is sleep a danger on the other hand. In fact, people who are 1 SDB, XVIIXX, 2. T. 28, 131 beginning a spiritual path may find themselves assailed by an overpowering wave of sleepiness whenever they begin to meditate. And then, if they stop meditating, this passes and they are not sleepy at all. This is simply one form of the ego's resistance and it has to be broken down. Mr. Bhargava also said something about sleep and this led Bhagavan to speak about sleep as follows. What is required is to remain fixed in the self always. The obstacles to that are distraction by things of the world, including sense objects, desires and tendencies, on the one hand and sleep on the other. Sleep is always mentioned in the books as the first obstacle to samadhi and various methods are prescribed for overcoming it according to the stage of evolution of the person concerned. First, one is enjoined to give up all worldly distractions and to restrict sleep. But then it is said, for instance in the Gita, that one need not give up sleep entirely. One should not sleep at all during daytime, and even during night restrict sleep to the middle portion, from about 10 to 2. But another method that is prescribed is not to bother about sleep at all. Whenever it overtakes you, you can do nothing about it, so simply remain fixed in the self or in meditation every moment of your waking life and take up meditation again the moment you wake, and that will be enough. Then, even during sleep, the same current of thought or meditation will be working. This is evident because if a man goes to sleep with any strong thought working in his mind, he finds the same thought present when he wakes up. It is of the man who does this with meditation that it is said that even his sleep is samadhi. It is important to remember this, because the Maharshi often spoke of sleep as an example of the egoless state. As the above passage shows, he did not mean that physical sleep is to be dd. pp. 279-80, 1. 132 encouraged. That is only a dark, unconscious counterpart of the true egoless state, which is pure consciousness. Another source of questions among those who continued further with meditation was that they sometimes came up against a blank or void or a feeling of fear, but they were told to carry on, holding firmly to that which experiences the void or fear. The same answer was also given to those who experienced a state of bliss. There can be neither fear nor pleasure, neither vision nor void, without someone to experience it. D. When I reach the thoughtless stage in my sadhana, I enjoy a certain pleasure, but sometimes I also experience a vague fear which I cannot properly describe. B. Whatever you experience, you should never rest content with it. Whether you feel pleasure or fear, ask yourself who feels it and continue your efforts until both pleasure and fear are transcended and all duality ceases and the reality alone remains. There is nothing wrong in such things being experienced, but you must never stop at that. For instance, you must never rest content with the pleasure of laya, dissolution, experienced when thought is quelled, but must press on until all duality ceases. 1. In the afternoon, the following questions were put by Mr. Bhargava, an elderly visitor from Jhansi in Uttar Pradesh. 1. How am I to search for the tea from start to finish? 2. When I meditate, I reach a stage where there is a vacuum or void. How should I proceed from there? B. Never mind whether there are visions or sounds or anything else or whether there is void. Are you present during all these or are you not? You must have been there during the void to be able to say that you experienced a void. To be fixed in that, you, is the quest from start to finish. In all books on DD, page 224, I. 133 Vedanta you will find this question of a void or nothing being left raised by the disciple and answered by the Guru. It is the mind that sees objects and has experiences and that finds a void when it ceases to see and experience, but that is not you. You are the constant illumination that lights up both the experience and the void. It is like the theater light that enables you to see the theater, the actors, and the play while the play is going on, but also remains a light and enables you to say that there is no play on when it is all finished. Or there is another illustration. We see objects all around us, but in complete darkness we do not see them and we say, I see nothing. In the same way, you are there even in the void you mention. You are the witness of the three bodies, the gross, the subda, and the causal, and of the three times, past, present and future, and also this void. In the story of the 10th man, when each of them counted and thought they were only 9, each one forgetting to count himself, there is a stage when they think one is missing and do not know who it is, and that corresponds to the void. We are so accustomed to the notion that all that we see around us is permanent and that we are this body, that when all this ceases to exist we imagine and fear that we also have ceased to exist. Bhagavan also quoted verses 212 and 213 from Vivekachudamani in which the disciple says, after I eliminate the 5 sheaths as not self, I find that nothing at all remains. And the Guru replies that the self or that by which all modifications, including the ego and all its creatures and their absence, that is the void, are perceived, as always there. Bhagavan continued and said, the nature of the self or I, must be illumination. You perceive all modifications and their absence. How? To say that you get the illumination from another would raise the question how he got it and there would be no 134 end to the chain of reasoning. So you yourself are the illumination. The usual illustration of this is the following. You make all kinds of sweets of various ingredients and in various shapes and they all taste sweet because there is sugar in all of them and sweetness is the nature of sugar. And in the same way all experiences and the absence of them contain the illumination which is the nature of the self. Without the self they cannot be experienced, just as without sugar not one of the articles you make can taste sweet. Later he continued, first one sees the self as objects, then one sees the self as void, then one sees the self as the self. Only in this last case there is no seeing because seeing is being 0.1 inches before closing this chapter it may be well to give a few more specific rules or rather to indicate that they exist but are not essential. It is usual to conduct what is called meditation during regular hours, morning and evening, sitting with a straight spine and closed eyes. I say, what is called meditation, because this word is commonly used for self-enquiry and concentration on the I am, or the heart, as described in this chapter. It is, of course, far from the mental reflection that commonly goes by that name. In India it is usual to sit cross-legged on the ground. However, all such rules of technique are less important in self-enquiry than with other less direct methods. Indeed, this is obvious from the fact that self-enquiry has gradually to be extended from set hours of meditation until it becomes the undercurrent of all thoughts and actions. Mr. Evans once asked a few questions. They related to yoga. He wanted to know if it was right to kill animals such as tigers, deer and so on and use the skin as a seat for the yoga posture, asana I, B. The mind is the tiger or the deer. D. If everything is illusion, can one then take life? DD, pp. 277-9, 1. 135b. Who has the illusion? That is what you must find out. In fact, everyone is a killer of the self, Atmaban, at every moment of his life. D. Which posture is the best? B. Any posture, possibly Sukhasana, the easy or half-Buddha posture. But that is immaterial for jnana, the path of knowledge. D. Does posture indicate temperament? B. Yes. D. What are the properties and effects of a tiger's skin or wool or a deer's skin as a seat? B. Some people have found out and described them in books on yoga. They correspond to conductors and non-conductors of magnetism and so on. But all this is of no importance on the path of knowledge, jnana marg. Posture really means steadfastness in the self, and it is inward. D. Which is the most suitable time for meditation? B. What is time? D. Tell me what it is. B. Time is only an idea. There is only reality. Whatever you think it is, it appears to be. If you call it time, it is time. If you call it existence, it is existence, and so on. After calling it time, you divide it into days and nights, months, years, hours, minutes, and so on. Time is immaterial for the path of knowledge. But some of these rules and disciplines are good for beginners. D. Does Bhagavan recommend any special posture for Europeans? B. It depends on the mental equipment of the individual. There are no hard and fast rules. Point 1. D. Is meditation to be practiced with eyes open or closed? B. It may be done either way. The important thing is that the mind should be turned inwards and kept active in its quest. T. 17. I. 136. Sometimes it happens that when the eyes are closed, latent thoughts rush forth with great vigor. But, on the other hand, it may be difficult to turn the mind inwards with the eyes open. It requires strength of mind. The mind is pure by nature but contaminated by taking in objects. The great thing is to keep it active in its quest without taking in external impressions or thinking of other things. Point 1. Although, as will be shown in the next chapter, the Maharshi approved of various methods and authorized them when they suited the practitioner, he was nevertheless careful that they should not be confused with the direct method of self-enquiry. For instance, there are indirect paths which sedulously cultivate the various virtues. But when asked about this, he replied simply that on the direct path of self-enquiry no such technique is necessary. D. It is said in some books that one should cultivate all the good or divine qualities in order to prepare oneself for self-realization. B. All good or divine qualities are included in spiritual knowledge and all bad or demoniac qualities are included in ignorance. When knowledge comes, ignorance goes and all the divine qualities appear automatically. If a man is self-realized, he cannot tell a lie or commit a sin or do anything wrong. It is no doubt said in some books that one should cultivate one virtue after another and thus prepare for ultimate realization, but for those who follow Thej Gnanamarga, path of knowledge, self-enquiry is quite enough for acquiring all the divine qualities, they need not do anything else. Point 2. In general, he approved the use of incantations by those who found them helpful, but he was insistent that self-enquiry should not become a mantra. 1. T. 61. 2. DD, page 276. 137D. Please tell me how I am to realize the self? Am I to make an incantation of, who am I? B. No, it is not intended to be used as an incantation. Point 1. However, the method which is most apt to be confused with self-enquiry is the meditation, I am he, and therefore he frequently warned against this confusion. Self-enquiry is a different method from the meditation, I am Shiva or I am he. I rather lay stress on self-knowledge, because you are first concerned with yourself before you proceed to know the world and its Lord. The I am he, or I am Brahman, meditation is more or less mental, but the quest for the self of which I speak is a direct method and is superior to the other. For, as soon as you undertake the quest and begin to go deeper and deeper, the real self is waiting there to receive you, and then whatever is done by something else and you have no hand in it. In this process all doubts are automatically given up, just as one who sleeps forgets all his cares for the time being. Point 2. Although the scriptures proclaim, thou art that, it is only a sign of weakness to meditate, I am that, not this, because you are eternally that. What has to be done is to investigate what one really is and remain that. Point 3. Only if the thought, I am a body, occurs will the meditation, I am not this, I am that, help one to abide as that. Why should you forever be thinking, I am that? Is it necessary for a man to go on thinking, I am a man? Are we not always that? 4a Punjabi announced himself to the Maharshi as having been directed here by Sri Sankaracharya of Kamakoti Pita 1t, 486. 2. SDB, v. 3. FV, 32. 4. FV 36. 138 from Jaleshwar near Puri Jagannath. He is a world traveler. He has practiced Hatha Yoga and some contemplation along the lines of, I am Brahman. After a few moments blank prevails, his brain gets heated and he becomes afraid of death. He wants guidance from the Maharshi. B. Who sees the blank? D. I know that I see it. B. The consciousness overlooking the blank is the self. D. That doesn't satisfy me. I can't realize it. B. The fear of death arises only after the T-thought arises. Whose death do you fear? To whom does the fear come? So long as there is identification of the self with the body, there will be fear. D. But I am not aware of my body. B. Who says that he is not aware? D. I don't understand. He was then asked to say what exactly was his method of meditation. He said, Abam Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. B. I am Brahman is only a thought. Who says it? Brahman himself does not say so. What need is there for him to say it? Nor can the real I say so. For I always abides as Brahman. So it is only a thought. Whose thought is it? All thoughts come from the unreal I, that is the T-thought. Remain without thinking. So long as there is thought, there will be fear. D. When I go on thinking on this line, forgetfulness ensues. The brain becomes heated and I become afraid. B. Yes, the mind is concentrated in the brain and hence you get a hot sensation there. That is because of the thought. So long as there is thought, there will be forgetfulness. There is the thought, I am Brahman, then forgetfulness supervenes. Then the thought arises and simultaneously the fear of death also. Forgetfulness and thought exist only for the thought. 139 Investigate this and it will disappear like a phantom. What remains then is the real that is the self. The thought, I am Brahman, may be an aid to concentration insofar as it keeps other thoughts away and persists alone. But then you have to ask whose thought it is. It will be found to come from the but where does the thought come from? Probe into it and it will vanish. The Supreme Self will shine forth of itself. No further effort is needed. When the one real, I, remains alone, it will not need to say, I am Brahman. Does a man go on repeating, I am a man? Unless he is challenged, why should he declare himself a man? Does anyone mistake himself for an animal that he should say, no, I am not an animal, I am a man? Similarly, since Brahman or I alone is, there is no one to challenge it, and so there is no need to repeat, I am Brahman. 1. Throughout this chapter, self-enquiry has been spoken of mainly as a spiritual exercise or meditation, to be practiced at certain fixed times. It does indeed begin so, and, so long as effort is needed, such times of intensive meditation continue to be helpful, but that is not enough. The self-awareness which begins to be experienced during such meditation has to be cultivated at other times also and indeed begins to awaken spontaneously, forming an undercurrent to one's activities. The aim is to make it more and more continuous. It will be seen that this explains Bhagavan's injunction, referred to in Chapter 3, to conduct one's spiritual quest in the world and not to retire to a hermitage. D. Is a set meditation necessary for strengthening the mind? B. Not if you keep the idea always before you, that it is not your work. At first effort is needed to remind yourself of it, but later on it becomes natural and continuous. The work will 202. 1. 140 go on of its own accord and your peace will remain undisturbed. Meditation is your true nature. You call it meditation now, because there are other thoughts distracting you. When these thoughts are dispelled, you remain alone. That is, in the state of meditation, free from thoughts. And that is your real nature, which you are now trying to realize by keeping away other thoughts. Such keeping away of other thoughts is now called meditation. But when the practice becomes firm, your real nature shows itself as true meditation. 1. For the reason mentioned in the previous chapter, a guru often withholds the technique of spiritual practice as a secret to be revealed only to those whom he finds fit and initiates into it personally. However, with self-enquiry as taught by Bhagavan, no such precaution is necessary. It is a person's own understanding that opens this method to him, or his lack of understanding that closes it. D. May I be assured that there is nothing further to be learnt, so far as the technique of spiritual practice is concerned, than what is written in Bhagavan's books. I ask because in all other systems, the guru holds back some secret technique to reveal to his disciple at the time of initiation. B. There is nothing more to be known than what you find in the books. No secret technique. It is all an open secret in this system. 2. 1 mg, pp. 13-4. 2. dd. Page 325. 141 Chapter 6 Other methods. D. Which method is the best? B. That depends on the temperament of the individual. Every person is born with the samskaras, characteristics or tendencies, from his past lives. One method will prove easy to one person and another to another. There can be no general rule. 1. In the following passage, Bhagavan indicates the purpose of all the methods and the goal they aim at. There are many methods. You may practice self-enquiry, asking yourself, who am I? Or if that does not appeal to you, you may meditate on, I am Brahman, or some other theme. Or you may concentrate on an incantation or do invocation. The object in every case is to make the mind one-pointed, to concentrate it on one thought and thereby exclude the many other thoughts. If we do this, the one thought also eventually goes and the mind is extinguished at its source. 2. Dr. Masalawala placed in Bhagavan's hands a letter he had received from his friend V.K. Ajgamkar, a gentleman of about 35, a follower of Jananaswar Maharaj, who is said to have attained jnana in his 28th year. The letter said, You call me Puma. Who is not Puma in this world? Bhagavan agreed and, 1t. 580, 2. dd. Page 28. 142 Continuing in the vein in which he discoursed this morning, the 15th of March 46, said, We first limit ourselves and then seek to become unlimited, as in fact we always are. All our effort is only directed to giving up the notion that we are limited. The letter went on to say, Ramana Maharshi is an exponent of the Ajata doctrine of Advaita Vedanta. Of course it is a bit difficult. Bhagavan remarked on this, somebody has told him so. I do not teach only the Ajata doctrine. I approve of all schools. The same truth has to be expressed in different ways to suit the capacity of the hearer. The Ajata doctrine says, nothing exists except the one reality. There is no birth or death, no projection or drawing in, no striving, no aspirant, no release, no bondage, no liberation. The one unity alone exists forever. To such as find it difficult to grasp this truth and who ask, how can we ignore this solid world we see all around us? The dream experience is pointed out and they are told, all that you see depends upon the seer. Apart from the seer, there is no seen. This is called Drisbasrishti Vada, or the argument that one first creates everything out of his mind and then sees what his mind has created. To such as cannot grasp even this and who further argue, the dream experience is so short while the world always exists. The dream experience was limited to me, but the world is felt and seen not only by me, but by so many, and we cannot call such a world non-existent. The argument called Srishti Drishti Vada is addressed and they are told, God first created such and such a thing, out of such and such an element, and then something else, and so forth. That alone will satisfy this class. Their mind is otherwise not satisfied and they ask themselves, how can all geography, all maps, all sciences, stars, planets, and the rules governing or relating to them all be totally untrue? To such it is best to say, yes, God created all this and so you see it. 143 Dr. Masalawala objected, but all these teachings cannot be true. Only one doctrine can be true. Bhagavan said, all these viewpoints are only to suit the capacity of the learner. The absolute can only be 1.1. However, although Bhagavan approved of other paths for those who could not follow self-enquiry, he did say to the present writer, all other methods lead up to self-enquiry. If a devotee of his found that some other, less direct path served him better, Bhagavan would guide him on this until he could gradually bring him to self-enquiry. Talking of the innumerable ways of different seekers after God, Bhagavan said, each should be allowed to go his own way, the way for which he alone may be built. It will not do to convert him to another path by violence. The guru will go with the disciple along his own path and then gradually turn him into the supreme path when the time is ripe. Suppose a car is going at top speed. To stop it and to turn it at once would lead to a crash, too. Other methods are not necessarily exclusive of self-enquiry. In fact, some of them may very well be combined with it. Sat sang the greatest of all aids to self-realization is the presence of a realized man. This is called Sat Sang, which means literally, fellowship with being. Even here Bhagavan would sometimes explain that the real being is the self and therefore no physical form is needed for Sat Sang. Nevertheless, he often dwelled on its benefits. 1. DD, pp. 173-4, 2. DD, page 49. 144 Association with sages who have realized the truth removes material attachments. On these attachments being removed, the attachments of the mind are also destroyed. Those whose attachments of mind are thus destroyed become one with that which is motionless. They attain liberation while yet alive. Cherish association with such sages. That supreme state which is obtained here and now as a result of association with sages, and realized through the deep meditation of self-enquiry in contact with the heart, cannot be gained with the aid of a guru or through knowledge of the scriptures, or by spiritual merit, or by any other means. If association with sages is obtained, to what purpose are the various methods of self-discipline? Tell me, of what use is a fan when the cool, gentle south wind is blowing? The heat of mental and bodily excitement is allayed by the rays of the moon. Want and misery are removed by the kalpaka tree. Sins are washed away by the sacred water of the Ganges. But all these afflictions are altogether banished by the mere darshan of the peerless sage. Neither the holy waters of pilgrimage nor the images of gods made of earth and stone can stand comparison with the benign look of the sage. These purify one only after countless days of grace, but no sooner does the sage bestow his gracious glance than he purifies 1.1. It should be mentioned that these 5 verses were not actually composed by Bhagavan but translated from Sanskrit for inclusion in his supplementary 40 verses. The statement in the second verse that such grace cannot be gained with the aid of guru is using the word guru in its lower sense of teacher. Otherwise it would have the same meaning as sage, and the comparison would be pointless. 1. FVS 1-5. 145 Breath control can have various meanings. It can be retention of breath, or regulation of breathing according to a definite rhythm, or merely watching the breathing and remaining attentive to it. The Maharshi often authorized the use of breath control, but did not as a rule specify what form it was to take, perhaps because those who asked for his authorization were usually practicing a form of it prescribed by some guru and merely wished to know whether they could continue to do so. He himself, although competent to authorize any practice, did not teach or prescribe the more technical forms of breath control. As there are elaborate treatises on the elements of Ashtanga Yoga, only as much as is necessary is written here. Anyone who desires to know more must resort to a practicing yogi with experience and learn from him in detail. 1. When he did specify what kind of breath control was to be practiced, it was usually just watching the breath, the type which is least likely to be harmful if practiced without guidance from a guru who specializes in this kind of technical, indirect path. Mr. Prasad asked whether the regular form of breath control is not better, in which breathing in, holding the breath, and breathing out are to the rhythm of 1-4-2. Bhagavan replied, all such rhythms, sometimes regulated not by counting but by incantations, are aids for controlling the mind. That is all. Watching the breath is also one form of breath control. Holding the breath is more violent and may be harmful when there is no proper guru to guide the practicer at every step. But merely watching the breath is easier and involves no risk. 2.
1 SE 34-2. ДД, pp. 55-6.
146 The Maharshi was careful in authorizing breath control to explain why it was used, that it was helpful simply as a step towards mind control. The principle underlying the system of yoga is that the source of thought is also the source of breath and the vital force. Therefore, if one of them is effectively controlled, the other is also automatically brought under control. Point 1. The source of the mind is the same as that of the breath and the vital forces. It is really the multitude of thoughts that constitute the mind, and the I thought is the primal thought of the mind and is itself the ego. But breath too has its origin at the same place whence the ego rises. Therefore, when the mind subsides, breath and the vital forces also subside, and conversely, when the latter subside, the former also subsides. Breath and vital forces are also described as the gross manifestations of the mind. Till the hour of death the mind sustains and supports these forces in the physical body, and when life becomes extinct, the mind envelops them and carries them away. During sleep, however, the vital forces continue to function, although the mind is not manifest. This is according to the divine law and is intended to protect the body and to remove any possible doubt as to whether it is alive or dead while one is asleep. Without such arrangement by nature, sleeping bodies would often be cremated alive. The vitality apparent in breathing is left behind by the mind as a watchman. But in the wakeful state and in samadhi, when the mind subsides, breath also subsides. For this reason, because the mind has the sustaining and controlling power over breath and vital forces, and is therefore ulterior to both of them, the practice of breath SI, Chap. 2, Section 3, IV, 1. 147 control is merely helpful in subduing the mind, but it cannot bring about its final extinction. Point 1. It follows from this that breath control, as authorized by Sri Bhagavan, is necessary only for those who cannot control the mind directly. D. Is it necessary to control one's breath? B. Breath control is only an aid for diving inwards. One can as well dive down by controlling the mind. On the mind being controlled, the breath is automatically controlled. There is no need to practice breath control, mind control is enough. Breath control is recommended for the person who cannot control his mind directly. Point 2. This implies that Sri Bhagavan did not authorize breath control as an independent technique, but only as an approach towards mind control. In itself, he warned that its effects were impermanent. For the subsidence of the mind, there is no other means more effective and adequate than self-enquiry. Even though by other means the mind subsides, that is only apparently so, it will rise again. For instance, the mind subsides by means of breath control, yet such subsidence lasts only so long as the control of breath and vital forces continues, and when they are released the mind also gets released, and immediately, being externalized, it continues to wander through the force of subtle tendencies. Point 3. Therefore, those who use it on the path prescribed by the Maharshi should also know when to give it up. 1. W. Section 12. 2. T. 448. 3. W. Section 12. 148b. Breath control is a help in controlling the mind and is advised for such as find they cannot control the mind without some such aid. For those who can control their mind and concentrate, it is not necessary. It can be used at the beginning until one is able to control the mind, but then it should be given up. Point 1. Another reason for caution in the use of breath control is that it may lead to subtle experiences which can distract the seeker from his true goal. As will be shown in the next chapter, Bhagavan always warned against interest in powers and experiences or desire for them. He sometimes specifically connected this warning with the use of breath control. B. Breath control is also a help. It is one of the various methods that are intended to help us attain ekagrata or one-pointedness of mind. Breath control can also help to control the wandering mind and attain this one-pointedness, and therefore it can be used. But one should not stop there. After obtaining control of the mind through breath control, one should not rest content with any experiences which may accrue therefrom, but should harness the controlled mind to the question, who am I? Till the mind merges in the self. Point 2. Asanas. It was usual for devotees of Bhagavan to sit cross-legged in meditation before him, but the more elaborate yogic postures or asanas were not practiced. As explained in the previous chapter, such postures are less important in self-enquiry than on a yogic path. 1. DD, page 228, 2. DD, page 221 to 2. 149d. A number of asanas are mentioned. Which of them is the best? B. One-pointedness of mind is the best posture. Point 1. Hatha Yoga. B. The Hatha yogis claim to keep the body fit so that the enquiry may be effected without obstacles. They also say that life must be prolonged so that the enquiry may be carried to a successful end. Furthermore, there are those who use various drugs, kayakalpa, to that end. Their favorite example is that the canvas must be perfect before the painting is begun. Yes, but which is the canvas and which the painting? According to them, the body is the canvas and the inquiry into the self the painting. But isn't the body itself a picture on the canvas of the self? D. But Hatha Yoga is much spoken of as an aid. B. Yes. Even great pandits well versed in Vedanta continue the practice of it. Otherwise their minds will not subside. So you may say it is useful for those who cannot otherwise still the mind. Point 2. Light gazing. D. Why should one not adopt other means, such as gazing at a light? B. Light gazing stupefies the mind and produces catalepsy of the will for the time being, but it produces no permanent benefit. Point 3. 1 T. 557, 2. T. 619, 3. T. 27, 150 Concentration on sound. There are those who concentrate on the hearing of a sound, not any physical sound but sound from the subtle plane. The Maharshi did not disapprove of this but reminded them to hold on to the self and find out who it is that hears the sound. The concentration achieved is good but does not in itself lead far enough. Enquiry also is needed. A Gujarati gentleman said that he was concentrating on sound, nada, and desired to know if the method was right. B. Meditation on nada is one of the various approved methods. Its adherents claim a very special virtue for it. According to them, it is the easiest and most direct method. Just as a child is lulled to sleep by lullabies, so nada soothes one to the state of samadhi. Again, just as a king sends his state musicians to welcome his son on his return from a long journey, so also nada takes the devotee into the Lord's abode in a pleasing manner. Nada helps concentration, but after it begins to be felt, the practice should not be made an end in itself. Nada is not the objective, the subject should firmly be held. Otherwise a blank will result. Though the subject is there, even in the blank one must remember his own self. Nada upasana, meditation on sound, is good. It is better if associated with self-enquiry. 1. Concentration on the heart or between the eyebrows. Concentration on the point between the eyebrows is a yogic practice. Bhagavan recognized its efficacy, especially T. 148, I. 151 when combined with incantation, but recommended concentration on the heart on the right side as being both safer and more effective. A Maharashtra lady of middle age, who had studied Jnanaswari and Vikbara Sagara and was practicing concentration between the eyebrows, had felt shivering and fear and did not progress. She required guidance. The Maharshi told her not to forget the seer. The sight is fixed between the eyebrows, but the seer is not kept in view. If the seer be always remembered, it will be all right. 1. A visitor said, "We are asked to concentrate on the spot in the forehead between the eyebrows. Is that right? B. Everyone is aware that he exists. Yet one ignores that awareness and goes about in search of God. What is the use of fixing one's attention between the eyebrows? The aim of such advice is to help the mind to concentrate. It is one of the forcible methods of checking the mind and preventing its dissipation. The mind is forcibly directed into one channel, and this is a help to concentration. But the method of realization is the enquiry, who am I? The present trouble affects the mind and it can only be removed by the mind. 2. D. Sri Bhagavan speaks of the heart as the seat of consciousness and as identical with the self. What exactly does the word, heart, signify? B. The question about the heart arises because you are interested in seeking the source of consciousness. To all deep-thinking minds, the enquiry about the I and its nature has an irresistible fascination. Call it by any name, God, self, the heart or the seat of consciousness, it is all the same. The point to be 1 T. 162, 2. T. 557. 152 grasped is this. That heart means the very core of one's being, the center without which there is nothing whatever. D. But Sri Bhagavan has specified a particular place for the heart within the physical body. That is in the chest, 2 digits to the right of the median. B. Yes, that is the center of spiritual experience according to the testimony of sages. The spiritual heart center is quite different from the blood-propelling, muscular organ known by the same name. The spiritual heart center is not an organ of the body. All that you can say of the heart is that it is the core of your being, that with which you are really identical, as the word in Sanskrit literally means. Whether you are awake, asleep or dreaming, whether you are engaged in work or immersed in samadhi. D. In that case, how can it be localized in any part of the body? Fixing a place for the heart would imply setting physiological limitations to that which is beyond space and time. B. That is right. But the person who puts the question about the position of the heart considers himself as existing with or in the body. While putting the question now, would you say that your body alone is here but that you are speaking from somewhere else? No, you accept your bodily existence. It is from this point of view that any reference to a physical body comes to be made. Truly speaking, pure consciousness is indivisible, it is without parts. It has no form or shape, no within or without. There is no right or left. Pure consciousness, which is the heart, includes all, and nothing is outside or apart from it. That is the ultimate truth. D. How shall I understand Sri Bhagavan's statement that the experience of the heart center is at that particular place in the chest? 153b. Pure consciousness wholly unrelated to the physical body and transcending the mind is a matter of direct experience. Sages know their bodiless, eternal existence, just as an unrealized man knows his bodily existence. But the experience of consciousness can be with bodily awareness as well as without it. In the bodiless experience of pure consciousness, the sage is beyond time and space, and no question about the position of the heart can arise at all. Since, however, the physical body cannot subsist, with life, apart from consciousness, bodily awareness has to be sustained by pure consciousness. The former, by nature, is limited and can never be coextensive with the latter, which is infinite and eternal. Body consciousness is merely a miniature reflection of the pure consciousness with which the sage has realized his identity. For him, therefore, body consciousness is only a reflected ray, as it were, of the self-effulgent, infinite consciousness which is himself. It is in this sense alone that the sage is aware of his bodily existence. D. For men like me, who have neither the direct experience of the heart nor the consequent recollection, the matter seems to be somewhat difficult to grasp. About the position of the heart itself, perhaps, we must depend upon some sort of guesswork. B. If the determination of the position of the heart is to depend on guesswork even in the case of the unrealized, the question is surely not worth much consideration. No, it is not on guesswork that you have to depend, it is an unerring intuition. D. Who has the intuition? B. All people. D. Does Bhagavan credit me with an intuitive knowledge of the heart? 154b. No, not of the heart, but of the position of the heart in relation to your identity. D. Sri Bhagavan says that I intuitively know the position of the heart in the physical body? B. Why not? D. Pointing to himself. It is to me personally that Bhagavan is referring? B. Yes, that is the intuition. How did you refer to yourself by gesture just now? Did you not put your finger on the right side of the chest? That is exactly the place of the heart center. D. So then, in the absence of direct knowledge of the heart center, I have to depend on this intuition? B. What is wrong with it? When a schoolboy says, it is I that did the sum correctly, or when he asks you, shall I run and get the book for you, would he point to the head that did the sum correctly or to the legs that will swiftly get you that book? No, in both cases, his finger is pointed quite naturally towards the right side of the chest, thus giving innocent expression to the profound truth that the source of I-ness in him is there. It is an unerring intuition that makes him refer to himself, to the heart which is the self, in that way. The act is quite involuntary and universal, that is to say, it is the same in the case of every individual. What stronger proof than this do you require about the position of the heart center in the physical body? D. But the question is, which is the correct view of the two, namely, 1. That the center of spiritual experience is the place between the eyebrows, or 2. That it is the heart. B. For the purpose of practice you may concentrate between the eyebrows if you like, it would then be bhibhyavana or imaginative contemplation of the mind, whereas the supreme 155 state of anubhava or realization, with which you become wholly identified and in which your individuality is completely dissolved, transcends the mind. Then, there can be no objectified center to be experienced by you as a subject distinct and separate from it. D. I would like to put my question in slightly different words. Can the place between the eyebrows be said to be the seat of the self? B. You agree that the self is the ultimate source of consciousness and that it subsists equally during all the three states of mind. But see what happens when a person in meditation is overcome by sleep. As the first symptom of sleep his head begins to nod, but this could not happen if the self were situated between the eyebrows. That center cannot be called its seat without implying that the self often forsakes its own place, which is absurd. The fact is that the sadhaka may have his experience at any center or chakra on which he concentrates his mind, but that does not make such a center the seat of the self. D. Since Bhagavan says that the self may function at any of the centers or chakras while its seat is in the heart, is it not possible that by the practice of intense concentration or dhyana between the eyebrows, this center may itself become the seat of the self? B. As long as it is merely the stage of practice of concentration in order to control your attention at one spot, any consideration about the seat of the self would merely be theorizing. You consider yourself the subject, the seer, and the place whereon you fix the attention becomes the object seen. This is merely bhavana. When, on the contrary, you see the seer himself, you merge in the self, you become one with it, that is the heart. 156d. Then, is the practice of concentration between the eyebrows advisable? B. The final result of the practice of any kind of dhyana is that the object on which the aspirant fixes his mind ceases to exist as distinct and separate from the subject. Subject and object become one self, and that is the heart. The practice of concentration on the center between the eyebrows is one of the methods of training, and thereby thoughts are effectively controlled for the time being. The reason is that all thought is an outer activity of the mind, and thought, in the first instance, follows sight, physical or mental. It is important, however, that this practice of fixing one's attention between the eyebrows should be accompanied by incantations. Because next in importance to the eye of the mind is the ear of the mind, that is mental visualization of speech, either to control and thereby strengthen the mind, or to distract and thereby dissipate it. Therefore, while fixing the mind's eye on a center, as for instance, between the eyebrows, you should also practice the mental articulation of a divine name or incantation. Otherwise you will soon lose hold on the object of concentration. This kind of practice leads to the identification of the name, word or self, whatever you may call it, with the center selected for the purpose of meditation. Pure consciousness, the self or the heart is the final realization. Point 1. The Sahasrara tantric paths teach the gradual uncoiling of the kundalini or spiritual current in a man. As it uncoils and rises upwards, it mg, pp. 54-9, 61-2, I. 157 enfranchises a series of chakras or spiritual centers in the body, each bestowing its own